Beside the point, Hassoun Tatum, a bright, cheerful young man with a very pleasant, engaging smile, eyes dancing with life. And speaking of dancing, he had danced on the Broadway stage. Well, he was killed in the Bronx Tuesday morning when a sniper with a machine gun fired on his car and riddled it with bullets. The shots came from an apartment building roof. Now, I want you to follow this. The shots came from an apartment building roof where young drug gang members regularly shoot their weapons for thrills. Now, mind you, when I tell you this, I'm not talking about an outpost in a foreign country. I'm not describing Stalingrad in 1942. I'm not talking about Sevastopol in 1941. I'm not talking about a war in the classic sense. And yet I am talking about a war that we have chosen to lose. Tatum was 18 years old. His death came as no surprise to the residents of the building at Pugsley and Ellis Avenues, and I can assure you that nobody on Pugsley or Ellis Avenues in that part of in the Bronx listens to the Bob Grant program. I doubt they even have any radios left to listen if they wanted to. But anyway, the residents of the buildings at Pugsley and Ellis, who say they nightly hear the jackhammer rattle of automatic gunfire from the roof, the shots echoing across the nearby Cross Bronx Expressway, they say they have lived for more than a year in a state of siege, terrorized by two youth gangs who call themselves the Vandals of Destruction and Private Enemy. But for members of Mr. Tatum's family, the bullets were a sudden and shattering end to a dream for him. The youth's father, Berkeley, said the family had planned to move this week from the Parkchester section of the Bronx to North Carolina to escape the violent crime and drug trade that are encroaching on the neighborhood. And shortly after midnight Tuesday, Hassoun Tatum left his house at 1919 McGraw Avenue in a black BMW sedan that he bought last month on his 18th birthday with money he saved during his 4 years as an understudy in the hit Broadway show The Tap Dance Kid. He was going out to buy a bag of potato chips and a soda at an all-night grocery store at Ellis and Pugsley Avenues, his father said. At 1:50 a.m., the youth was driving west on a service road at the Cross Bronx Expressway on his way home from the store when someone fired dozens of shots at his car from a, get a load of this, a .223 caliber machine gun. Now, that was verified by the 43rd Precinct. I'd like to know what the heck the 43rd Precinct is doing. Why they haven't rounded up these thugs. As a matter of fact, I have an answer to these thugs, and that is to arm the police to the teeth and tell them to go in and kill every last one of them. But they won't do it. It'd make too much sense. Anyway, the 43rd Precinct sergeant said the shots were fired across the expressway from the roof of an apartment building at 2004 Ellis Avenue, where detectives discovered scores of used shell casings. At least 8 bullets hit the car, shattering its windows, riddling Mr. Tatum. One of the bullets struck Mr. Tatum in the back of the head, and he died later in an ambulance at Jacoby Hospital. The police sergeant said the police believed the gunman was aiming at the BMW and intended to kill the driver, but it was unclear whether he picked the car at random or believed it to belong to someone else. He said Mr. Tatum was not involved in any illegal activity that would have made him a target for drug gangs. But since the shooting, dozens of people have called the police with information about the drug gangs that operate in the building and at the corner of Ellis and Pugsley and their frequent shootouts. But the callers, of course, are too frightened of retaliation from the gangs to become witnesses. Ladies and gentlemen, residents of the apartment building at 2002 Ellis Avenue said that they regularly hear these vermin firing weapons between midnight and dawn on the roof of the building and on the corner of Ellis and Pugsley. They said the two gangs repeatedly break locks and come and go in the building with impunity. With impunity, that means without fear of any reprisal. The gang of thugs known as Private Enemy, whose members have scrawled a graffiti ideogram of a man in a gun sight around the neighborhood, is known to deal crack cocaine and other drugs on the corner. There have been 4 murders, 1 shooting within a block of the building in the last 6 months. No one in the building would give a reporter their names. They said they feared the gangs would kill them if their name appeared in print. This past year has been a nightmare, said one weary grandmother. You're practically a prisoner here. What does she mean, practically? You are a prisoner here. Now, you want to tell me that we are not a third world nation when that goes on? Want to tell me that we have any semblance of civilization, law and order when that goes on? Now, that woman is a prisoner. And another guy who was called a prisoner but never really was, we are his prisoners, that fat slob Al Sharpton. And by the way, for as long as anyone can remember, Sharpton has been known as much for his big fat stomach and fat as his mouth. But he may just walk out of jail, or he must have walked out of jail, perhaps slightly less paunchy. He claims he's been fasting in his 50-square-foot cell. Now, if it is true that the slob fasted, here's what he gave up. Sunday's dinner menu featured Italian sausages, carrot raisin salad, macaroni, potato mix, bread, and ice cream. This is at Rikers Island, folks. On Monday, it was Salisbury steak with brown gravy, mashed potatoes, pickled beets, bread, and peaches. Yesterday, Sharpie Sharpton allegedly resisted pork chops with pineapple sauce, Spanish rice, turnip greens, and applesauce. And if he had stayed in jail one more day, he would have eaten fried fish, French fries, pea salad, and peaches. Too bad he's leaving, said Correction Department spokeswoman Ruby Riles, because the day after he leaves, we're having pepper steak. And then you read about Pete Rose going to do 5 months at Marion, and they talk about the manicured lawns, the handball courts just finished, the bowling alleys, the tennis courts, the fact that the 6 baseball teams that form a softball league in prison would like Pete to play on their team. Talk about the water fountains. Talk about the statuettes. I mean, you know, we do take... You do get better treatment if you're a violator of the law than you do if you're just a citizen, like that poor grandma up in the Bronx. You know, we are really a nation that endures slobs. We have a slob like Chironi Salam. I wonder where she gets all the money to have her hair done. Vicious, vile creature. No wonder her son is a mutant. And then we have that fat slob Roseanne Barr. What a disgrace. What a disgrace. Now, Roseanne Barr is a fat slob who is filthy and vile. But she's only one person. You know what disturbs me about Roseanne Barr, and I presume you know I'm talking about her because of the way she acted at Jack Murphy Stadium, where the Padre game against the Cincinnati Reds doubleheader was played yesterday. She sang. She massacred the national anthem and then made the most obscene gesture. She grabbed her crotch in a most vile way because she didn't like the way the audience was booing her. Anyway, my complaint is not so much with her. My complaint isn't even a complaint, it's a question. What does it say about us as a people that she is one of the most popular, her program is one of the most popular programs on television? You know what it says? It says that we're a bunch of gabons. That's what it says. Can't take any more of it. Isn't that awful? Isn't that? It's unbelievable. That tells you two things. That tells me two things anyway. That Roseanne Barr was born a slob. She lives as a slob. She'll die as a slob. But it also tells me that human nature has a curious facet to it, and that is the more you extol somebody, the more you pay them, the more you make them a big star, the more arrogant they become. Robert, you're on WABC. Hello.
Bob, yesterday the New York State delegation down in Washington refused to consider the elimination of state and local tax deductions on the federal income tax. In fact, one of them was quoted as saying that it would be an additional tax on the New York State middle class. Now, I think it would be the removal of a subsidy to middle class and well-to-do New Yorkers, and I think it would be the removal of a reward for inefficient government here in New York, because let's admit it, the whole delegation is opposed because if there was a removal, there'd be more opposition in the state to the tax and spend policies that we have here. And there's a curious facet to the statement. The very day before, D'Amato and Schumer were saying that the $100,000 a year farmers should not be subsidized by the U.S. government. Now, why not turn to New York State and say, hey, the $100,000 a year income tax people in New York State, they can't deduct.
Well, I know what you're saying, and believe it or not, I agree with you. And believe it or not, so does the New York Times agree with you.
Oh.
But no surprise, it'll never take place because the vested interests are just too powerful. The point you make, though, is so true, and that is that scum like Cuomo and Florio know that they can get away with at least a certain amount of their taxation on the basis of saying, yeah, but it's deductible. What that means is that people in other states of the Union have to take up the slack, but they're not going to take up the slack. Instead, they're going to emulate New York and New Jersey, and they, too, are going to keep increasing taxes. That will make more deductibility around the nation, and that will create an even bigger deficit. Because what the Democrats want, what they dream about, I imagine Richard Gephardt, George Mitchell, Congressman Gray, they probably have dreams every night, orgasmic dreams, probably have wet dreams that they're raising taxes. Thank you very much. This is Bob Grant. Hello, Matt.
Yeah, hi. First, I wanted to say that the fellow you had on your newsbreaker line was terrific. I think he made some great points. He was articulate, well-spoken. It was really good. We all see these Hollywood liberals, Meryl Streep, Robert Redford, Ed Asner, Gregory Peck, Whoopi Goldberg was doing that comic relief, which was nothing more than an assault on Reaganomics. I want to ask you your opinion on this. Why does not the Hollywood right, people like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Tom Selleck, all those guys, why doesn't this seem to affect them? Why don't, do you think they're being bullied into compliance by threatened with blacklisting or whatever? No,
I don't think that. I don't know what you expect from them. You want them to produce motion pictures? That's a big undertaking. I am sure that Schwarzenegger and Selleck, if they were given roles to play that they felt were guilty of the type of propaganda we're talking about, they would not do it. Neither one has played a part in a motion picture dealing with this subject. Remember, not all motion pictures produced are left-wing propaganda pieces. A lot of them are, but not all of them.
But what about their activism? You know, figure you got.
I just got through telling you I don't believe any of them have acted in such pieces. Do you know of a Tom Selleck motion picture that was a left-wing propaganda motion picture? Any of the 10 that the names that I gave, he wasn't in any of them. Neither was Schwarzenegger.
No, but I'm not talking about in movies. I mean, you know, Ed Asner was in a march with Jesse Jackson condemning the thing in Panama. I just mean things that they do on their own.
Well, Selleck does things on his own. Schwarzenegger does things on their own. Both of them supported President Bush in the campaign. I don't know what it is you're driving at.
No, it just seems to me that, you know, they get no notoriety for any of that. And if,
well, they do get some. They don't get as much because, remember, most of the media is left-wing also. By the way, if I had Medved still on the line, I'd ask him if he saw a TNT production. That's TNT is a cable network.
Yeah, Ted Turner.
They had Brian Dennehy in one of the most anti-Reagan motion pictures you could ever see. A real left-wing, pro-left-wing motion picture that they did the other night. And naturally, the critics all hailed it. Well, I thought it was a bore. Thank you, Matt.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
Wes, you're on WABC.
Yes, I just want to say that I'm outraged at what happened to the jogger, but also I see you picking on Salams and some of the people's families, and I don't think you should be picking on the family.
I tell you why I'm picking on the family. Because the woman in question hit a photographer, kicked a photographer. She's been saying outrageous things.
Did you see what farmers?
Oh, wait, we're talking now about the jogger trial.
I know.
I have to laugh at low-life scum like you who drop out of the trees and try to pull this shtick. It's not going to work. Get off my phone, you vile thing, you. They always pull that type of mentality. They're talking about one thing, and they want to talk about something else. Ah, dear me. Anyway, it's coming up to the end of round one right here on WABC. But, of course, we'll continue. Hear them out, just as I have, and you can draw your own conclusions. Right. Researcher for the International Research and Educational Society. Don't let that title scare you. This is not going to bore you. Mike Chandler is the founder of the organization. Mr. Chandler, let me ask you, what was your intention in organizing and founding this organization?
Our intention, Bob, was too many people believe myths and beliefs as truths and facts. We wanted to disseminate and portray information to people that's actually stripped of preconceived dogma and comfortable philosophies. Because the beginning of our documentary, we discuss ignorance. And ignorance actually robs people of their options. When people have a problem medically, they see a doctor. The people have a problem legally, they'll see an attorney. But right now, too many people want to know, where did religion begin? What was the influence of religion? What's the influence of Freemasonry, which is very rarely discussed, which we're going to discuss today? And we want people to know there are other options out there that they might not be aware of. So that's why we're very, very pleased and very happy that we were invited here today.
Ladies and gentlemen, these two gentlemen happen to be here because I saw a documentary, a videotape, a documentary that was produced in which both of these gentlemen appear. Jordan Maxwell, whom I introduce now, who's a chief researcher. Mr. Maxwell, I'm not going to ask you to speak for Mr. Chandler, but I do ask, are you an atheist?
No. As a matter of fact, I am not an atheist, and I don't want to appear to be anti-Christian or anti-religious. I am interested in facts, because I don't think you can make good decisions without good information. I believe in a supreme power in the world. I think probably I'm more agnostic than anything, but I'm very respectful of religious beliefs and of other people's feelings. But I'm also an academic and a teacher, and I appreciate facts, and I am an investigative reporter of sorts. I like investigating and then reporting, and that's why I'm here today.
Mr. Chandler, Do you feel the same way that Jordan Maxwell feels?
Yes, that's why we're in our society together. We have mutual feelings.
So
on
you're
the
not
same
atheist,
matter.
but you're agnostic?
Absolutely.
Now, how do you differentiate? A lot of people intertwine the words. They interpose, they transpose.
Well, Gnostic is a word which means wisdom or knowledge. Therefore, agnostic in the Greek means the opposite of wisdom. Therefore, someone who is a Gnostic is like a Jehovah's Witness, for instance, who will tell you that they have the whole truth.
Yeah.
Therefore, they are a Gnostic cult because they have the truth. But an agnostic is one who is intelligent enough to say, if he doesn't know, that I'm just not sure.
On what do you base your belief in a supreme being, though?
I think that there are too many things which happen in the world which I think all thinking people know that there must be some higher, shall we say, an overshadowing force because of the astrology and all of the things which have happened in history. There are just too many things that happen in history with no real rational explanation. And I also can't believe that we as intelligent creatures are the product of time and chance. I don't think that. But I think that God, if there is a God or whatever he is, has been grossly misrepresented, grossly shoved out of shape by men's own concepts and men who dominate other men to their own undoing because of religion. I think that what we need now, it's idea whose time has come. What we need now is some facts concerning God.
What do you say to those people, though, who are shallow? It's my word. They're shallow. They don't have the intellectual depth. They're just incapable of seeing the difference between being spiritual and being religious. And they have to have a religious discipline, if you will. They have to believe in ceremony. They are people I call, for want of a better word, superstitious.
Yes, that's a very good word, because that's basically what their belief system is, a superstition. In Los Angeles, I was asked by one caller, doesn't religion help people? Doesn't it help them get through the difficult times? And why would you be saying something that would be, against religion? And the point I made was that drugs help people get through hard times. But you don't help a person by just salving over their questions with religion. You help people by telling them the truth, by giving them a good basic answer based on facts, and let them make their own decision based on facts. Because as Mr. Chandler brought out at the beginning, I was going to bring up that ignorance is the greatest enemy that this country and this people face, because ignorance robs you of your ability to make good decisions and have your options. In the ancient East, there was an interesting old saying that men stand in their own shadows and then wonder why they're in the dark. And that is certainly true in every facet of life. We so many times blind ourselves to things we should have seen, but we just didn't look for. And then when we find out that we were wrong, we say, well, how could we have been so foolish or been so ill-informed? Because you chose to be. And that's what we're here to do today, is to help people to understand that there is more to know about religion than what they've been told.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you that when I saw the videotape last week, I put it on in almost a pro forma way. I said, oh, well, I have this tape, let me examine it. Oh, hum. And before I knew it, I was absolutely captivated by this documentary. Gentlemen, have you tried to get this documentary put on television?
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, we're going to be putting it on television. We already have contracts in different parts of the country already, and even I think
will it be shown in this area?
I think so, in this area too, on cable, and hopefully we will be...
Yes, on Manhattan Cable, August 5th. It will be on at noontime.
Well, that's going to give you a very limited audience.
Yes, but we're going to
have you approached any of the commercial channels?
We're in the midst of doing that.
Yeah, we're in the
Look,
midst,
I'm not your agent, ladies and gentlemen. These fellows have not slipped me 20 grand out on the table, although they could.
They couldn't.
But the fact of the matter is, this is a compelling piece of television. And I hope that we have a compelling piece of radio here for our listeners. And in just a moment, I'm going to ask our guests, Jordan Maxwell and Mike Chandler, if unequivocally there was no such person as Jesus Christ. Unequivocally, was Moses a myth? Unequivocally, did the Jews steal from the Egyptians, and did the Egyptians steal from the Babylonians, and did the Christians steal from the Jews, and so forth and so on? These and other tantalizing questions will be answered by our guests in just a moment.
No, we're primarily involved in religion and religio-philosophy as it deals with political movements. So it's actually religio-political, because obviously religion is politics, and politics is religion. And if we go back into ancient history, we will see that all political movements were religious in nature, and all religious movements were political in nature.
When is the first time that we have in recorded history any evidence of what we would call religion?
Oh goodness, that can go all the way back to the ancient Aryans or to the Twa people in Central Africa. We're talking about perhaps as in somewhere between 10 to 15,000 years ago. There were religious relics and ancient writings and pictures, even without writing, pictures. And actually, if you think about this is a very interesting point, and I will use what you ask to introduce the idea that I wanted to get across about where Christianity began. Because the concepts of Christianity are the oldest in the world. That's why the Bible is called the greatest story ever told.
Do you have any idea who in blazes wrote the Bible?
Well, yeah, that's quite a subject, because there has been a lot of research done on that. A lot of books have been written about it, and it doesn't seem that the people who we think wrote it actually, in fact, wrote it. And that's something you have to do your homework on, because it's not exactly right.
You spent in your documentary, you spent a lot of time poking holes in the New Testament. You didn't spend much time talking about the Old Testament.
Well, let's look at the Old Testament then for a couple little quick points. For instance, why is it that God, have you ever thought about this? Why God is always a man? He's always the father. A lot of feminists have asked the question, couldn't God be the mother? But no, in our Western civilization and in most religions of the world, God is a father. Have you ever wondered why? I'll tell you. Because of rain. The ancient Aryans, thousands and thousands of years before Egypt ever existed, the ancient Aryans of the world believed that rain was the holy fluid that comes out of the Father, God the Father in heaven, and impregnates Mother Earth. So therefore the holy fluid comes down from heaven, impregnates Mother Earth, and that's why he has to be a father, and the earth is the mother, and we're the offspring of the earth. And of course that ancient time, we're talking, as I said, about 10,000 years ago, that was called, in the ancient Aryans, they called it the wedding feast of Cana. That's what it was. And the wedding feast of Cana was celebrated in the land of Cana, where God's son is asked by Mother Earth to make it rain and draw water to make it rain so that the grapes could grow for the great marriage feast between God the Father and Mother Earth. And let's see, some of the other things about on churches. When you go by a church, you see the pointed arch of the door, the pointed arch of a door on a church.
Yes.
The reason why we have a pointed arch is because that represents the female. That the man, and that's why we always have men in charge inside the church, because the pointed arch is the woman, and therefore the man enters into the woman, and that was called in Hebrew, that was called the Holy of Holies, through sex. Therefore, that's why we have the pointed arches today. And of course, all priests wear long robes, usually black robes, and the reason for robes, because a robe was a feminine dress. And the man was representing that he was using feminine wisdom, or the Greeks called it Pisa Sophia, feminine wisdom. He wears the woman's dress on the outside, yet he's a man on the inside. So that's why we have the men wearing the long robes. Incidentally, that's why also we have judges in our courts, and when people graduate from college and high school, they wear those same long black robes, because feminine wisdom, the feminine intuition of the ancient people, women were held to be the holders of wisdom of God. The men were the fighters who got the food and who fought the enemies, but the women were the ones that were godly.
In your And ladies and gentlemen, we are just really scratching the surface here because of the limitations of time and the medium. But in your documentary, you suggest very strongly that some group decided to create Jesus Christ, and that they were inspired apparently by past religious practices of the Egyptians.
Right. Now, what I am not saying here, I am not saying that Jesus as a man never lived. There was a man named Jesus. Today, even the Jews throughout the world will readily acknowledge that there was a man named Jesus. But Jews do not accept the story in the New Testament of the New Testament Jesus, because that man that we read about in the New Testament never existed. There was no such a man that did those things in the New Testament. But there was a man named Jesus.
Was there a man named Jesus who was crucified on a cross in Jerusalem?
He was put to death. But it was not the same. It was not the same man. That's the point I would like to make here, is that the man you read about in the New Testament never existed. There is a man named Jesus. His correct name in Hebrew was Yehoshua ben Pedera, or Yehoshua ben Pedara, or translated Jesus, son of the panther. And in the Talmud, Jews will read in the Talmud about Yehoshua ben Pedera, who was a magic practicing priest who did many magical things, who was an Essenic. He was an Essene. He collected a large body of followers around him. He was a radical against the Jewish establishment in Jerusalem, etc., etc. And then Roman authorities came in and used that division between the Essenes and the Hebrews as a people to divide them by politically maneuvering this story called Christianity to divide the Jews. And that's why today Jesus, or Yehoshua ben Pedera, are two different people. There was a Jesus. He was put to death, but he did not live in the same era of time. He did not live in that same exact time of that Jesus.
Was there
was
there not a person who claimed to be the Messiah?
Oh yes, absolutely. He was an Essene. He was called the Messiah by the Essenic group, by the Essenic Jews, but he was well known for being a magic practicing priest. Perhaps it would be better if I explain Christianity rather than trying to explain the man. Let me start off by saying that the ancient people of the world, the Aryans and the Central Africans, the Dogons tribes, the Twa people, the ancient peoples of the world lived in a very hostile environment. It was very cold at night. It was frightening. They had animals, predator animals. It was a very hostile world to live in the ancient world. They didn't have the kind of things that we have today.
Lifespan was something like 21?
Yes. Now, if you can imagine for a moment, put yourself back in those days when the sun went down, it became very fearful and cold out, and you couldn't do anything. You just stayed at night watching the animals. Therefore, when the sun would come up in the morning, they saw the sun as their salvation. Mm-hmm. Because if the sun doesn't come up, we're lost. So therefore, the sun became known as, they asked the question, well, who owns the sun? Obviously, no one owns the sun. Therefore, the sun belongs to God. He became known as God's son. Incidentally, that's why we get the concept, the metaphor, that your boy, your male offspring, is called your son, because he's the hope of your life. He's your hope for the future. He is the light of your life.
And yet we spell it differently. I hate to interrupt you, but here we are on radio, and that's what you have to do every now and then, interrupt even at a most crucial point, but we will return. If you've just tuned in, I hope this isn't too heavy for you. Jordan Maxwell, Chief Researcher for International Research and Educational Society, and the founder of the society, Mike Chandler.
This announcement is exclusively for New York State residents. If you have a good driving record and are fed up with paying high insurance rates because of the poor driving record of others, here is wonderful news for you. U.S. Capital Insurance Company of White Plains, New York, knows a good driver when they see one. U.S. Capital Insurance Company saves good drivers big money on car insurance, no matter who you're presently insured with, even if it's State Farm, Allstate, Liberty Mutual, Travelers, or Geico. You owe it to yourself yourself to find out how much you can save. Call U.S. Capital at 1-800-876-3600. 1-800-876-3600. That's 1-800-876-3600. Find out for yourself why so many New York State residents are making the switch to U.S. Capital. Call 1-800-876-3600, 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Friday for a free rate quote. That's 1-800-876-3600.
What may impress you the most about the Oldsmobile 88 Royale is the fact that it's a real 6-passenger luxury car.
Tell them about the $1,500.
Or that the Oldsmobile 88 Royale has more interior room than either the Ford Taurus or Dodge Dynasty.
Tell them about the $1,500.
Yeah, or that with its fuel-injected V6 engine, the Olds 88 Royale is more powerful than the Lincoln Continental.
Tell them about the $1,500.
All right already. Come into your good Olds guy before August 3rd. Make your best deal, and then get $1,500 cash back on the Oldsmobile 88 Royale. That's $1,500 cash back on the luxurious, powerful 6-passenger 88 Royale. You happy now?
Tell them about the CD player.
Hey, they don't call us good Olds guys for nothing.
See the new generation. That's your good old guys.
You must take retail delivery from dealer stock by August 3rd. CD player is optional. See your good Olds guy for details.
And now, a WABC Health News Minute with Carol Ann Stripple of the Johns Hopkins Medical Center.
Skin cancer is the most common form of cancer in the U.S. Experts estimate the number of cases of malignant melanoma doubles every 10 years. Despite those threatening odds, many people continue to worship the sun, even those who have had skin cancer. A recent study finds nearly 40% of people who had suffered skin cancer still balked at using sunscreen. Dr. Warwick Morrison is a dermatologist at Johns Hopkins.
It's difficult to change people's habits, and they probably got their skin cancer because they got out in the sun too much, didn't use sunscreens. So I would say it's rather pleasing that at least 60% did start using a sunscreen. I think it was a good result, not a bad result.
The study indicates tans are more important to many people than the threat of skin cancer. For WABC, I'm Carol Ann Stripple at Johns Hopkins.
Good morning on this Saturday, 28th of July. We have 73 degrees now, mostly cloudy, but the forecast says it'll clear up later in the day. Here's how it goes. Areas of low clouds, some fog, and patchy drizzle this morning. And then becoming partly to mostly sunny and warm this afternoon, highs in the low 80s. For tonight, it'll be partly cloudy, some patchy fog overnight, lows in the upper 60s to around 70. Tomorrow, Sunday, a mix of clouds and sun, warm, highs in the low to mid 80s. And then maybe some rain on Monday. The outlook goes like this: mostly cloudy, warm, humid, chance of showers, possibly a thunder shower on Monday. It's mostly cloudy now, but going to clear up. 30.21 rising, that's our barometer. East-northeast, the winds 9 miles an hour. Humidity 67%, down quite a bit in the last hour or so. And the temperature 73. 73, mostly cloudy. That's our forecast. I'm Bruce Anderson, back to Bob Grant.
I'd like to go public with our guests, but you wanted to continue explaining something, Mr. Maxwell, so go ahead.
I just wanted to say that the sun was adopted in the very beginning as the symbol for deity, because the sun gave us life, and gives us our life and our light. It causes our food to grow, so it was our provider. It was our creator. And the ancient people realized that the sun didn't belong to anyone, so therefore it must belong to God. It became known as God's sun, the light of the world. Well, of course, it's the light of the world. They said that no life came to be on earth except through the sun, because they realized that energy from the sun gives all the life on the earth. So therefore, the sun became the symbol of life on the earth and everlasting life. God's Son was our salvation because he is risen. They didn't say the sun gives you life only until he is risen. And if he doesn't come up, then we don't have life. God's Son gives his life for us because the ancient people remembered and understood that the sun gives off energy, and therefore we get energy from the sun, therefore the sun gives us our life. So God's Son gives everlasting life. The ancient people also said that they realized that as long as the sun keeps coming up in the morning, there's always going to be life on the earth. Therefore the sun became the symbol for everlasting life. And of course, when the sun goes down, he was the Prince and King of Kings, because all kings used his emblem of the sun around them, all sunbursts and So he was the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. However, when the sun went down, the Prince of Darkness came out. Well, of course it gets dark when the sun goes down. So the Prince of Darkness comes out to chase away God's Son. God's Son dies for 3 days because the sun in the winter stays on the sundial, the ancient sundial. They noticed that the sun stopped for 3 days, the 22nd of December, 23rd, and 24th. And it didn't move any further south, and it didn't move any further, didn't come back our way into the northern hemisphere. So they said God's Son dies for 3 days. And of course on the 25th, God's Son is born on the 25th. And if you take a round sundial, if you take the round calendar and you divide the winter solstice from the summer solstice, you've got a straight line through the middle. Then you divide the autumn equinox from the spring equinox, you now have a cross. And in the winter, God's Son dies on the cross. And that's why on all churches you will see crosses with a round circle in the middle of the cross, because that's God's Son, the round symbol of the sun. God's Son dies on the cross. And of course, every year, December 25th, he's born again. And interesting that they said that when the sun is born in December 25th, we're halfway out of winter. So the sun was now moving towards spring, and in the spring equinox, in the spring autumn equinox, and the spring equinox, in the spring, the sun brings new life to the world. Now, in the spring, being our March in our calendar, in the Egyptian calendar, the astrological sign for spring was Virgo. Therefore, God's Son is born of a virgin, Virgo the Virgin. They said that in the spring, when God's Son was in the death of winter, he was dead in winter, but now he is born again in spring. Therefore, he has passed over. And the Jews began celebrating the Passover on the first day of the spring equinox, the Passover. There was no such a thing as a story in the Old Testament about the angels going through Egypt and all of that. That's just a story. That's what the Bible's called, the greatest story ever told. Not the greatest book of facts ever told, it's the greatest story. It's just a story. And the reason why it's the greatest story ever told, because it's the oldest story ever told. And if you do your homework, you're going to find out it's the only story ever told. It goes all the way back to the ancient Egyptians, God's Son. He is risen, the salvation. He's born of a virgin. He has 12 apostles. Well, of course the Son has 12 apostles. The 12 signs of the zodiac, or the 12 months of the year, are his helpers. And he says that's incidentally why we have 12 jurors in America. The 12 jurors are there to help bring the truth to light, because God's Son is the truth and the light. It was said that Jesus, or God's Son, dies on Golgotha because the Son has always represented intellectual enlightenment. He is the truth and the light. And consequently, the Aryans and the ancient Egyptians says that men will put to death the light of truth in their minds. In your mind is where you reject the light of truth. Therefore, you have put to death God's Son, the enlightenment, in your head, Golgotha, skull place. And that's why in the Bible, Jesus is said to have been put to death in skull place, Golgotha, because you put the light of truth to death in your head. Let's see, and then we have the crown of thorns. When Jesus dies with this crown of thorns, the crown of thorns is like the Statue of Liberty with the crown of thorns. It's the sun rays. The sun rays. Of course, in the Egyptian religion, we have the Holy Family, like the Holy Family of England, the royal family, which was Osiris, Horus, and Isis. Horus was God's son, the light of the world. And in his official capacity as a mediator for God, he was called Amun-Re, or Amen-Ra, which is where we get sun ray. Amen, A-M-E-N hyphen R-A, Amun-Re. And at the end of the prayers in Egypt, they would say amen, because they were sending their prayers through God's Son to the Father. He becomes, let's see, the marriage feast of Cana. It's interesting, too, that the Son moves through each one of the constellations, his 12 apostles, or his 12 helpers. He begins his administration to each zodiacal sign at the 30th degree and ends at the 33rd degree. And that's why Freemasons have the 33rd degree, because it's in honor of the sun.
You know, this is very fascinating. It really is. But I'm afraid it's a little too much for everybody to absorb all at once.
I should think so.
And we'll take a brief time out. Then let's take some telephone calls, see what kind of response we get on the basis of what you've been able to say thus far. Fair enough? All right. Let's take a phone call, gentlemen. Neither one of you have... that's it. Now they're putting on their earphones. Okay. Robert, you're on WABC. Hello.
Hi, Bob. I find your guest today absolutely fascinating.
Thank you, sir.
And I must say that what you are saying makes too much sense for it not to be true. I'm sure, if you'll excuse the expression, that you guys have caught more than a little bit of hell over all of this.
We certainly have.
But what you're doing is pointing out what I've always felt, is that there's a lot of what organized religion has to say just doesn't make sense. And I was told something a long time ago in a philosophy class that helped me deal with religion, because I've always felt that there is a superior being, but brutality in the world today really makes you question what you are told in most of your organized religions. And it was basically that your organized religions will tell you that God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-merciful, and that he can be any two of those things, but he cannot be all three. He may know that a plane is going to crash, and he may have the ability to prevent it, but he might not be merciful to stop it. Or he may want to stop it and may know that it's going to crash, but may not have the power to do so. And I found keeping that in mind has really helped me come to terms with my feeling of what a superior being is and what his abilities are.
Yes, it's a very good point. And the questions that you raise, of course, are not new ones. They've been asked by the great minds of the centuries, and no one's really been able to come up with the correct understanding. So it's merely a philosophy. My problem is that I am very concerned that the religious leaders and the politicians that we have today are the best that money can buy. But I'm sick and tired of people using, misusing, abusing, and exploiting people who are ignorant in certain fields. Because you're ignorant in religious philosophy doesn't mean that you're ignorant. It just means that you're not aware of certain things. And it's very dishonest to cause people to be frightened to death, to put guilt trips on people because of your particular philosophy and because of your particular Gnosticism. As Jehovah's Witnesses have the whole truth, and of course then the Mormons, they have the whole entire truth, and Seventh-day Adventists have the absolute truth. And then we come to find out that those organizations have as their founders Freemasons, cathedrals, and monuments to man's inhumanity to man. It's time the truth be told. It's time the people understand. And I think this is an idea whose time has come. And if there's a God in heaven, there's got to be a time when this story is going to come out. And that's why I would suggest that you get the tape, because we're dealing with this. And it will give you a 30-year head start, because it's taken us 30 years to put the material together. Get the tape and then start from there, because we have an enormous amount of research material to present to the public, and we want people to know the truth.
Our tape, incidentally, can be purchased for $24.95. It will cover the roots of all religions in the world and the influence of Freemasonry on politics and the political influence of Freemasonry anywhere in the world. You can make out your check or money order to IRES, that's the initials, P.O. Box 1527, Glendale, California, 91209. That's IRES, Box 1527, Glendale, California, 91209. That includes postage and handling, the $24.95. And I'm sure you'll enjoy this documentary because it's really explosive.
Let me bring out something else that I think is very important for people to know. Our concept of God in Christianity came from the Egyptians. The Egyptians said that the Father, God the Father, was called in their language I-O, a large I and a small O, I-O. Now, that's where, incidentally, we get the Ionian Sea in the Middle East, the Ionian people, but from the I-O. And, of course, we have in our own country, Iowa. And Iowa is the Hebrew god Yahweh or Yahweh or Iowa from the ancient Egyptians. And it would be interesting to find out why it is that the presidential elections in this country are always held in the same city, the same state, Mason City, Iowa. You better do some homework and find out why our country elects its president in Mason City, Iowa as the first presidential primaries. There's a reason. And if you do your homework, you're going to be very surprised. Now, I-O later becomes to the Hebrews Yahweh or Jehovah Yahweh. Jehovah is actually El. Incidentally, that's where we get the state of Israel. I-S was Isis. R-A was Ra, son of God, Ra. Isis was the original creative principle, so we have I-S, R-A, and then the Hebrew God was El. I-S-R-A-E-L, Israel. That's where Israel gets its name from. Egypt, the Egyptian son of God, and then El being the Hebrew God.
Now, you speaking of Israel, you in your documentary, you talk about the tablets that were brought down, I believe, in Babylonia.
Yes.
And are you saying that the Jewish leaders stole from the Babylonians?
Well, let's say stole. Let's just say borrowed, because
borrowed.
Yes, because everyone else borrowed too. The story of the holy man coming down out of the mountain with the great tablets, and that's why today we have a sheriff in this country. Originally, we have a sheriff, which is like Omar Sharif, the Sharif. Yeah, the Sharif was the great lawgiver in Egypt, and if you break the law, that's why with Moses breaking the law, so you broke the law, and the Sharif will get you. And no, it wasn't as if they stole it. They just borrowed from the ancient
Was there a
Moses?
Was there a Moses?
As a man, no. There was no such a man as Moses. It comes from the Pharaoh Thutmoses. Thutmoses the first, Thutmoses the second. Thutmoses, thought, is where we get the word thought from Thut. Moses was the great lawgiver, so it's Thutmoses, and it actually goes back to more ancient times when the Aryans said that their lawgiver comes down with the great law, and then the Semitics had the same story, then the Babylonians have the same story, then the Egyptians have the story, and then the Jews have the story. So it's actually a very old story.
We'll continue in just a moment.
There was no such a man that lived that was the man of the New Testament. That was a story. That's why the Bible's called the greatest
story. A lot
story.
of people gave up their lives for...
Well, yeah, a lot of people gave up their lives for Hitler, but he wasn't a Messiah either.
Yeah, but he lived, and people believed in him.
You know, but the point is, people will die if they believe in something. It doesn't mean it's true. If they believe that the person is somebody that he isn't, they will die. So just dying for a leader doesn't make the leader who he says he is.
It doesn't make it who he says he isn't either.
No, I'm just saying that...
You have no proof. You have a dogmatic... you know what you're doing? You're mixing up paganism and Christianity. It's true that over the years, Christianity has become corrupted by pagan beliefs.
No.
Before the Christian religion,
Christianity never became corrupted by paganism.
Yes, it was.
Christianity
is the chief example of a corrupt form, a paganized form of Christianity, and you can prove that at the library.
Let me ask Robert a couple of questions so I can determine, for want of a better phrase, where Robert is coming from. Are you a religious believer, Robert?
I'm a believer, yes.
Are you a member of an organized religion?
No, I'm not.
Are you a practicing Christian?
I believe in Christian concepts, but I'm trying to improve my practice.
Do you accept Jesus Christ as your Savior, as your Redeemer?
Yes, right, I do.
You do?
Yes.
Therefore, in order for you to accept what Mr. Maxwell and Mr. Chandler are saying, that would mean that you have vested your faith in a non-existent person. In other words, the person you believe is your Redeemer and your salvation doesn't exist if you were to believe them.
Well, that's true, but I don't believe them.
Do you believe that you can come to God only through Him, through the Son?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Well, we have a devout Christian here, Mr.
Well,
Maxwell.
I believe. Let me
explain something to you where Jesus comes from. Yeah. As I said before, the Father in heaven was Iowa, and in the Son, or Horus, had a personal name. You will find his name was Iousus, I-O-S-U-S, or I-O-S-E-S. And when the Greeks came into Egypt, they changed the I's to J and becomes J-esus.
I'm interrupting. I have to interrupt. Hold it. I have to interrupt here. I'm going to do something we rarely do. I'm going to ask Mr. Maxwell and Mr. Chandler to remain for the next hour, who's debating with our guests. I want you gentlemen to know that I get a lot of mail. Mr. Chandler is still with us. Jordan Maxwell is still with us, Chief Research for International Research and Educational Society. I get a lot of mail, and much of the mail people have letterheads. I'm going to show you this one. This is a letterhead, and it's, look at the top there. What does it say at the top? It's part of the letterhead.
Praise the Lord in scribbling. And then it has a scripture, 2 Corinthians. Yes, I know. Well, we get quite a few letters like that, too.
I have this, Dear Bob, every day someone tells you, have a good day, but how many tell you how? You can have a good day every day if you know Jesus Christ is your Savior. That is the only way you can have a good day every day. Jesus said, from John, chapter 6, verse 37, Him that cometh to me I will in no wise cast out. And then from Romans 10:13, Whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Call upon Him today and be saved, and you can have a good day every day. Then Jesus will be with you always. Okay. There's a couple of more quotes, but I think you get the message.
Well, after
gentlemen,
2,000 years, we've heard the same story for 2,000
But gentlemen,
years.
what does that mean to be saved? Would you please tell me about this? Who palmed off this this crap of original sin? I mean, I see little babies born, cute little thing, oh, and somebody says, they must be baptized for they are in sin, and if they die, they will... How could a little thing like that, how could he be in sin? What did he do? Nothing. Could you explain that?
Yes, that goes back to Egypt. You will find that the god Anubis was a dog-headed god, a jackal, and in his hand, or leaning his hand on a scale, like the Masonic scale. And they have a baby sitting on the scale, and on the other side was your sins. And therefore, that's where we get the idea that God will judge you. It was an old Egyptian concept that the God will put you on the scales of justice and judge you. And of course, that was picked up and used because it worked awful well. It was a guilt trip. And if you could get people to believe that the Lord or the boogeyman is going to get them, then you can control them. It was a form of control the Egyptians used, that when you die, you will go to heaven or hell. And of course, the idea of heaven and hell is, in the Hebrew word, meant a hole in the ground. That's why you put a helmet on. You put a helmet because you're burying your brain in a hole. Yes.
Not only that, the word salvation actually means to be worth your salt. Sal is salt, so salt was a very powerful commodity back in the early times. It was a great preserver. So everybody wants to be worth their salt, or the salt of the earth. That was the salvation, salt. It really means we worth your salt.
What we were talking about just before the break, I want to make that point again, because in Egypt, the father was Ao, or Osiris, but the son was Horus, and his personal name was Iousus. It was spelled I-O-S-U-S.
This is in ancient Egypt, what, about 3,500 BC, something like that?
Yes, well, in the first 13 dynasties of Egypt. On the 14th dynasty, Egypt became involved, and many other races of people came in and started diluting the Egyptian religion. But in the first 13 dynasties, the son of God, God's son, was Iousus, and spell I-O-S-U-S.
So even the ancient Egyptians had this concept of a son of God.
Yes, God's son, because he is risen, and he is our salvation. But when the Greeks, of course, the Ptolemies and the Greek emperors came in and took over Egypt, they changed the I's to J. So therefore, God's son no longer was Iousus, the great Io, or the son of God. He became Jeusus, or Jesus, Jesus. And then we have this, there was something very interesting too, that the flood, the story of the flood of Noah. In Egypt, once a year, in the Central Africa, the rains would come, the monsoon rains in Central Africa would run down the mountains of Central Africa, running north into the tributaries, which would overflow the Nile, so that once a year, the Nile would overflow. The Egyptians call that the great destruction of the land of Egypt by the great waters of chaos, the waters of chaos. But with that waters of chaos would bring water for the plants, and bring minerals from the highlands. And so once the water receded, it was said that Egypt was baptized in water and came out anew. Egypt was born again. And therefore, they had a celebration once a year after the flood where Egypt was born again, coming up from under the water. And they called that celebration the celebration of the wet moon. The wet moon, because the moon is in the lower quarter when the rains come. And that wet moon today is even still called the Arca Noah. Arca Noah. So the celebration of the Ark of Noah is actually the Egyptian Arca Noah, the wet moon that brings the great flood that destroys the world and brings a new life.
What inspired you to do all this research? And as I said earlier, ladies and gentlemen, this is just the tip of the iceberg. What inspired all this? Why did you devote so much time to studying all this?
Well, when I was very, very young, 8, 9, 10 years old, my family, my mother's uncle was an official at the Vatican. He worked in the Vatican Secretary of State's office. And on occasions, he would come home to America to talk with the family, to visit with the family. And at those times, at a very young age, I would sit and listen to the men talk. And he would explain all of the different philosophies of the world, where they came from, the different religious concepts and where they came from. And as a very matter-of-factly explain all of these interesting things about Jewish history, Catholic history, ancient history, medieval. And then he used to talk about the occult movements of Freemasonry, the secret societies, the subversive orders, and it was all very, very interesting to me. And so I just grew up around that kind of an environment. And became very interested in my teen years and began to devote myself about 15 to 16 years old to studying Nazi philosophy, and then communist philosophy, then Roman philosophy. Then I got into Greco-Roman philosophy. Then I got into Babylonian religio philosophy. And it just never stopped. It was just fascinating material. I never had formed an opinion about anything, but I wanted to be informed about things.
Were you born were you raised a Catholic?
Yes, I was a Catholic. But I was just interested in all the philosophies of the world, the great religions of the world, and I could never understand how there would only be one particular truth and everybody else in the world was wrong. And of course, I never could understand the concept that there was one holy people in the world, one people who God loved, and everybody else was on the outside. I never bought that, and I still don't. And then when we find out that you go back into the Bible, and now we find there's so much in the Bible that we have misunderstood because of there's a science called archaeolinguistics, the ancient languages of the world.
All right, I'm going to have to stop you right there because we have another one of these interminable interruptions. Did we have Robert still waiting on the line? The fellow was debating. No, he didn't stay on the line. All right, let's go to David right now. David, hello.
Okay.
Hello, David.
Right, I'm Bob?
Yes?
Okay, listen, I've been listening to you, and I'm very, very surprised that you would let this group, these two people, give a verbiage over the past...
Why not? This is America. Don't we have the freedom to speak our mind in America? Isn't this a democratic country?
I just want to make a statement.
Would you take us off the air? Would you take us off of the air?
Can I make
No, I'm afraid of you. I'm afraid of someone who is frightened. I'm afraid of someone who doesn't want me on the air.
That's Jordan Maxwell talking to you. That's not me.
Okay, Bob.
Why do you not want me on the air?
Thank you, Bob.
What do you mean?
I understand where you're coming from, but I'm really a little
wait a minute. First of all, stop. Let me speak for myself. I don't need anybody speaking for me. I have to laugh at people like you. No, I do a program 5 days a week. And you say, how could you let them? That's what I'm here for. No, to let them, to let you, to let myself.
No, Bob.
Hear these ideas.
No, Bob. I'm not interested in. I'm not so turned off by that. I'm turned off by the fact that you let so much time give on your program.
We're guests. That's why we're giving you time.
No, it's not. It's not the point. The point is that there was no feedback, and I'm not going to get into a religious.
What do you mean by feedback?
Feedback, because we've been listening to you. And your
Now, wait a minute. Let me answer that. All right, I've got an answer for that. I've been handed the same line throughout the country. Christians call in especially and say, you're not giving us equal opportunity, and we should have...
On, man.
Now, wait a minute, I'm talking.
You're really lost. You're a lost soul. Because really, I don't say that the Holy Spirit, and anything that can be given from the Holy Spirit, nobody can say that Jesus Christ is Lord except by the power of the Holy Spirit.
All right,
Now,
let me
that's what we
answer.
believe
But
as Christians.
let me go on with what I was saying
All right,
before
yeah,
I was
yeah, but
rudely interrupted.
That's what we believe.
I don't care what you believe.
Nobody's trying to take your
you don't
belief
care
away.
what
Hey,
we believe?
David, hold
Hey,
on a
Bob,
minute. Hold on a
you hear
minute.
that?
This is the
He
Bob
doesn't
Grant
care what
Show,
we
will you?
believe.
Hold on a minute. Hold on a minute.
Hey, Bob.
Nobody
You
is.
hear that? He doesn't care what we believe.
Nobody is. Well, I don't either. I don't care what you believe, David. You're welcome to believe whatever you want.
I care what you believe.
Huh?
I care what you believe.
Well, that's fine. I'm glad you care what I believe.
Yeah, but you've been on a diatribe and Bob has let you go, and you and your friend.
Wait a minute. I'm going to answer
Diatribe?
that. Now, let me answer it. Would you let me answer it?
It's just been a disgusting
I know that, but let me
diatribe.
answer it. Okay,
It's
let
a
me answer your...
What are you afraid of, David? For heaven's sake, hear the guy out.
All right, he's a Gnostic, man. He's as Gnostic as anybody else that knows the answers.
I don't know the answers. I'm still
But
looking.
you're a Gnostic. You're
No, I'm
putting
an
down Gnostics,
agnostic.
and you're a Gnostic yourself.
I am an agnostic because I admit that I do not know the cosmological answers of the universe.
Cosmological. Give me a break. Faith comes through
All right.
belief.
All right,
You don't know Jesus Christ as Lord except you believe Him.
Okay, now I'm going to
And that
answer
comes
your
from God.
question. I'm going to answer you if you will let me.
Here's a follower of Jesus.
Okay.
Here's a follower of Jesus, hostile, mean, angry.
I'm not angry. I'm just.
You sound like a jerk. You sound like a jerk. You sound like a two-bit jerk, David. Shame
No,
on you.
you're not. You're not. I'm not a jerk. You're letting this guy.
Oh, get off the air. Get off my phone, you creep.
All right, let me answer that.
I can't. Wait a minute. You take it easy here.
Okay.
This is my show.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
I let you interrupt him, which I rarely let a guest do. That's for me to do, okay?
Okay.
Unless he addressed you directly. All right? Now that we have that straight, let me say this. I can't stand people like that who call just because you're on. If he wanted to debate a point, that's his right. But to complain just because you're on is, in my view, totally not valid. Now, say what you want to say.
Well, thank you, and you're right. I have had to put up with this in different cities that we've been in. Christians will call in and say that we should, the Christians should have an equal voice, an opposing point of view. But my question is, when have we ever, in the history of this country, ever viewed a television program, heard a talk program, in any way listened in the mass media to Christians when there was an agnostic or an atheist on to give an opposing point of view? Only until someone else comes on with an opposing point of view, then Christians demand to have an opposing point of view. This is America. We don't need to have an opposing point of view. Every man's allowed to speak his own beliefs. Every man's allowed to be free to speak what he wishes to. That's America. But only, and I am very highly incensed at this, when Christians demand to have an opposing point of view. We've been listening to Christianity for 2,000 years, and Christianity allows no opposing point of view. They didn't allow it in the Middle Ages. They didn't allow it in the first century. They don't allow an opposing point of view in this country. And I'm very much afraid and fearful for our democracy and for our freedom in our country when we are not allowed to have...
Okay. To estrange you from your beliefs. But if you want to listen to some interesting conversation, you're tuned to the right station at the right time. Dan, you're on WABC. Hello. Are you there, Dan?
Oh, hello, Bob. How are you?
What's on your mind, Dan?
I'd like to ask your two guests if they're at all aware. My first gripe with them really is about the connection of the Egyptian and Babylonian and all the other world religions with Christianity. I was wondering if you don't see any problem with connecting those all in the sense that, sure, they might share some related things, but does that really mean that they result from each other, or does it mean that it just grew and sprung up independently?
Well, I appreciate your question, and I appreciate the way in which you ask it. As I said before, I don't want to sound anti-Christian. I am not. I'm a scholar, and I want to look at the facts. The fact of the matter is that the story in the Bible about Jesus, the entire New Testament, is nothing more than a carbon copy of an ancient religion that goes all the way back to the Aryans about the sun and the 12 helpers, or the 12 signs of the zodiac, or the 12 apostles, the companions of the sun. And it's a very ancient and old religion. It is in a Jewish book, the Bible, but it is not a Jewish story. And so, yes, it is true that Christianity is a retelling of the most ancient old story in the world, and that's why the Bible is called the greatest story ever told. It is the only story ever told.
Right.
And that's why. And in all, it's not just a lot of interesting little connections, but it is academically provable. Every single facet of Christianity and the teachings of Christianity were already well in existence long before the Jews were ever even came into being a nation. And that's why I connected it with the more ancient empires.
Okay. Further than that, I was just wondering, now, why does this... that doesn't necessarily mean that God couldn't have used these things and turned them into a greater purpose. For instance, the cross originally was viewed as the symbol of death and misery and total humiliation and destruction. However, in our Christian belief, we feel that God reversed the symbol of the cross and turned it into a kind of hope and life.
Saying that...
Why not the same example used as God turning paganism or world religions to his own purpose, in his own timetable? For example, the Hindus would argue that because they are one of the oldest people contemplating who God is and what he is, therefore they have the truth. But we would argue rather that, well, God is not bound by human timetables, and he can reveal himself in any manner he pleases and in any time he pleases.
Okay, all of that is very good. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just your particular view of things and your particular philosophy as to how you explain it to yourself. But it actually is not valid on the world scene of academics. It's not valid, but it is your view, and I respect your view. But that's not exactly what happened.
Okay,
the fact of the matter is, what happened is that this story has been the oldest story in the world about the risen Son being our Savior, because obviously if the Sun doesn't come up, we're not saved. And and the fact that you go out at night and look up in the stars, what are you looking at? Well, you're looking at the sky. Well, what's another name for the sky? The sky is heaven. You're looking up into heaven. Therefore, in the daytime, when the God's Son is risen, he's gone up to heaven. Therefore, when you tell old people when they die they're going to go to heaven with the Son, that's outrageous. They're not going to heaven with the Son. God's Son is in heaven. And when he's over the top of your head at 12 noon, the Egyptians called him the Most High, because he wasn't very high when he was born, and when he dies, he's not very high. But when he gets straight overhead, when there's no shadow of the pyramid, he was referred to as the Most High. Therefore, the Hebrews have El, or Yahweh, the Most High.
Okay, lastly, sir, I want to know, I've just returned from Rome. I spent a month there, and if you look in some of the catacombs, such as Santa Prisca and Santa Clemente, you see some of the examples of the early birth of Christianity, icons and paintings dating as early as 120 and 150 A.D., dispelling the idea that Christianity was somehow invented and propagated under a political form, which it was in the Roman Empire, but to try to say that, and for example, the tomb of Mary, the Mother of God in Jerusalem, and her burial place, and the whole story surrounding her as being the Mother of God, how do you explain those theologies in light of the fact that you claim that Christ was not the man that we read in the New Testament? What explanation can you give for Mariology springing up as early as 110 A.D. if Christ were not as what he believed the apostles believed he was?
Okay, fine. Mariology is even older than the concept of God's Son. Mariology goes all the way back to the very beginnings of what we call Isis, the feminine creative principle in the universe. The Chinese have a different name for it, the Yad Cheng. The Isis was the mother of God, the mother of heaven. She had many different names, and all of those emblems and symbols you saw in the walls of the catacombs were because ancient Rome, the ancient Roman Empire, got its philosophies and ideas and concepts from a more ancient people, and everyone knows that. That's why the ancient, the very first Christians were using the same ancient, age-old symbols that have always been used by the ancient people, showing that it is from an ancient source. For instance, in manna from heaven, in the Old Testament, we talk about the Jews were fed manna from heaven. If you look at the word manna from heaven, in the catacombs, you will see manna from heaven pictured on the walls of the catacombs.
They were mushrooms.
They were mushrooms, absolutely, psilocybin. So the high priest of Israel would take the psilocybin mushroom, and then after puffing on it or eating it or whatever way they took it, then they would go out and talk to God.
A funge.
Yeah, that's it. And seven-candle lampstand, as I said before, the seven-candle lampstands, the seven great gods of the world, the seven great lights of the heavens. which
yes,
was...
again, sir, but you totally disregard the possibility that these symbols were used in a Christian light instead of in a pagan light. You constantly insist that they were derived solely because of their pagan virtue, and not because that somehow the Christians turned it into a different science.
Okay, your Bible says, can a bad tree give forth good fruit? That's a Bible, New Testament theology. Can a bad tree give forth good fruit? Can something good come from a bad beginning? Something that is evil give birth to something that is good? And your Jesus said, no, the bad tree cannot give forth good fruit. Therefore, if your religion, or if the Christian religion, is mimicking every single thing that has been in the world for thousands of years before it, and it was pagan and evil and ungodly, then how can your religion, after spray painting it and reselling it as a new religion, then you can say and justify that this new religion is now wonderful and holy coming from God, when it's the same ancient old religion just spray painted and resold to a new people who are not very well read in history.
If you'd like to remain on the line, you certainly may, but right now we take a brief time out, and then we'll continue. Time is running out so quickly. I know there are many things you wanted to talk about, Mr. Maxwell. You wanted to talk about the all-seeing eye on the dollar bill and why it's there. You wanted to talk about why New York is called the Empire State. Why is New York called the Empire State?
Because the New York is called the Empire State because it is the state of the new empire. And the new empire, like George Lucas, The Empire Strikes Back, there is a metaphysical story, excuse me, a metaphysical story going on here. There is a new empire being formed in the world. It's called the New Order of the World, the New World Order. It's on the back of the dollar bill. If you turn the back of the dollar bill on the left-hand side, you will see a pyramid. Pyramids are in Egypt. And that Egyptian pyramid has on the top of it the words Anokopias. Anokopias is Latin for, anot means our enterprise or our project, and kopias means is now a success. Therefore, anokopias means our enterprise is now a success. At the bottom of the is a banner under the pyramid that tells what the enterprise, which is a success, what it is. And it's a novus ordo seclorium, which is novice, where we get the word new, ordo, order, and seclorium is where we get the word secular, seclorium meaning the world. So at the bottom of the pyramid, we have New Order of the World, the New World Order, which is exactly what Brezhnev, the current Russian leader, Gorbachev, and our president are meeting on the island of Malta to the newspapers and the magazines are saying to bring together the New World Order.
Very interesting. You talk about the dollar bill. It says, "In God we trust." Why do you suppose it says, "In God we trust"?
Well, that's a Masonic terminology, and it really was just relatively recently put on the dollar bill. But the other emblem with the pyramid is a very old, ancient Masonic
with the all-seeing eye.
With the all-seeing eye. Now, the eye, of course, is Jesus. The eye is Jesus on the dollar bill, because you'll see around the eye is the light emanating from around the eye. That's God's sun. The sun is illuminated on the top of the pyramid.
Why? Here we are, the United States of America. The founding fathers were virtually all of them from England.
Yes, and virtually all of them Freemasons.
And yet, phrases in Latin. How come these phrases are in Latin on the American dollar bill?
Because many Masonic orders in the ancient world and in the old world of Europe used Latin as an in-house writing. On the other side, you will see, on the back, continue on the back, but on the opposite side, on the right-hand side, you will see the presidential, or what is called the Great Seal.
Yes.
You'll see 13 stars above the eagle's head.
Yes.
If you'll look closely, you'll see that 13 stars make up the Star of David, or the hexagram. And there are 13 stars. There are 13 stars. There are 13 leaves. There are 13 feathers. There are 13 arrows. There are 13 layers in the pyramid because 13 is an unlucky number. Why? Because Jesus and the 12 make 13. And that's why it's an unlucky number for us on earth to use, because it's a heavenly number among Freemasons. It is a Freemasonic terminology. The fact that, as I said, New York was called the Empire State because Rome ruled the world in the old world. And America was set up as an opposition to Rome, and to bring about a new order of the world, a novus ordo seclorium, and the old world order under Rome. And that, of course, goes back to the 1st century when there was the wars between between the Romans and the Jews in the Middle East, and therefore the founding of America was to become freedom from Rome. And that's why, of course, Jehovah's Witnesses, the founder of Jehovah's Witnesses, Charles Taze Russell, is buried under a pyramid. And Jehovah's Witnesses today are preaching a new world order.
Yeah, they're real wackos.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, Thomas Jefferson said, "We are not afraid to follow truth wherever it may lead, nor to tolerate any error so long as reason is left free to combat it." In that spirit, we'll continue in just a moment. Hello.
Good evening, Bob. Mr. Maxwell.
Yes, sir.
I know virtually nothing about the Freemasonry movement, but I get the distinct feeling that you feel, or that you've implied, that the politics of this country is being manipulated by the Freemasonry movement. Am I correct in my assumption?
Well, I don't know if I would say manipulated, but heavily influenced in that our presidents, the presidential elections are always started in Mason City, Iowa, and Iowa is the Hebrew god Yahweh, and that we know that the country was founded by Freemasons, and I have nothing whatsoever against Freemasonry. I have many friends who are Freemasons, so I'm not trying to pick a fight with Freemasonry. I am merely an academic, and what I am saying is provable history that Freemasons have been heavily involved in political and sociological movements throughout the world. I don't fault them for that, but it's a fact.
Well, I was always under the impression that the first primary in this country is held in New Hampshire.
Well, it used to be. It used to be.
Yeah.
It used to be held in New Hampshire.
Yeah, it's in Iowa.
Now Iowa has what they call the caucus, the Iowa caucus, remember?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vivian, you're on WABC. Hello.
Hi. I tuned in a little late when your guests were talking to the caller by the name of Roger, and he made a statement that about the Egyptians with their first son called I can't pronounce it, Iosus, he said?
Iousis.
Iousis, okay. And he made a statement that when the Greeks came into Alexandria that they changed the I to a J. I don't know where he gets his facts, but there is no J in the Greek alphabet, not in the modern day or in the ancient Greek alphabet. The Latin alphabet has a J, yes, but not the Greek. Because the Greek, they pronounce Iousis, Iisus. That's how they pronounce Jesus.
I understand that.
So if you understand that, then you better get your facts straight before you make any statements again about the Greek language and about what
I'm
the
afraid
Greeks
you
changed.
haven't really done your homework.
I have studied ancient Greek.
Let me answer it. All right.
It's not my homework. I am a Greek
Would you let him?
heritage.
Would you let him
Yes,
answer?
I will.
We're very impressed with you, Vivian. Now let's see if he can respond.
Yes.
We know that I and J have always been interchangeable in the Greek. And in the Hebrew, we also see in the Hebrew God Jehovah is Iova, and even Hebrews know that there is an interchangeable, it is interchangeable, the I and the J, and that's all I was saying. And that we know that the God the Father was Iosis, Io, and later on his son was Iousis, and today we have Io as like John, John was actually Ion. So there's really no discussion. There's no problem there. As we're talking about the translation.
And there's also no time left. I appreciate both of you gentlemen coming in, Mr. Chandler.
Yeah.
Thank you for also being with us. And that slams the lid on things for today. Until tomorrow, this is Bob Grant reminding you, your influence counts. Use it.
WABC, New York.
It's Beverly, Bob Grant here. You're on WABC.
Oh, I'm so flattered. Hi. But following Al D'Amato, I have to digress for 1 minute to respond to something that he said before I go into my topic. Is that all right?
Whatever you wish.
Okay.
Beverly?
I just want to say that he said that we can't waffle. We have to show we're strong. But, we're just dancing on all sides. 1 minute we're against the PLO, then we're for the PLO. We're against Syria, we're for Syria.
No, we're never for. No. That's not true. That you're making misstatements right now.
Why? We're very anti-Syria, and suddenly we became a little friendlier with them.
Well,
we were anti-Iran,
no.
and now we're suddenly trying to be good friends with them.
No, we're not suddenly trying to be friends with them. I haven't heard anybody say, let's be friends with them. I have heard people say, right now, everybody is angry with Saddam Hussein. As of the moment, Saddam Hussein presents a very serious threat.
Absolutely. I say let the other Arabs jump in and take care of it. They
very good, Beverly. Congratulations on WABC. I'm not going to waste my time. I'm not going to waste my time with the likes of her. Tom, hello.
Hello, Bob. How you doing?
You want to start over again, Tom?
Yes, I would.
Okay. Hello, Tom. You're on WABC.
I'm doing okay. Bob,
I didn't ask you how you were doing. Let's try it one more time. Stop that nonsense of how you doing stuff, okay? I didn't ask how you were doing, okay?
Gotcha.
Hello, Tom. You're on WABC.
Well, I've just had first-hand experience with our glorious governor, Jimmy Pockets Florio, recently while looking for a new vehicle. I'm currently looking into leasing a new truck, and found out that with the new tax increase, with every leased vehicle, you now have to finance the sales tax, which amounts to a good $1,000.
Oh, boy.
On top of that, you can also count on paying $100 some in registration fees, and not to mention my added coverage for insurance, which is going to amount to somewhere over $300.
Oh, boy.
So thanks to our glorious governor, I'm going to be down a few thousand.
Well, you sound like a young man, Tom. And there are people, young people, who had intended to build their families, raise their families in the state of New Jersey. Their parents and their grandparents lived in New Jersey. I'm hearing from them all the time at public events I attend, letters I get, cards I get. They say they do not feel that their future is in New Jersey and they want to get out. That is the first time I have encountered that in the 20 years I've been in the tri-state area.
I'm sorry to say it, Bob, but I think I'm going to be one of them. It's really discouraging. I was looking forward to perhaps settling down in the Garden State, but I'm looking elsewhere because it's really become discouraging.
Well, I don't blame you, Tom. As a matter of fact, if there is an exodus out of the state, I would not be surprised. I predict there will be, because the onslaught of this Jimmy Florio attack is such that it seems to penalize you no matter which way you turn. I've talked to people in the telemarketing business, for want of a better term, that's what we call it, people who sell on the telephone, people who pile up big telephone bills. Mm-hmm. Well, he put the 7% sales tax on a telephone bill. It's not a sales tax. It's a charge that they're adding on. This maniac, and I think that Florio is a maniac, is out to destroy New Jersey. There's no doubt about it. And he's succeeding.
Well, I think he really believes at this point that this tax package of his is going to do some kind of good for the state. He's out of his mind.
Well, that's like a doctor. You know what he reminds me of? Prior to modern medicine learning what it has learned, and that would take maybe up until about 90 years or so ago. It was a common practice for doctors to bleed patients. For some stupid reason, if a person had a fever, had a headache, whatever they had, doctors would bleed patients. Did you know that?
Oh, yes.
Well,
George Washington.
And that's right. And what that did in most cases would, in all cases actually, make a patient weaker, because then they, in addition to whatever virus they were suffering from, they would suffer from a loss of blood. Well, that's what Jimmy Florio reminds me of. Maybe we ought to call him the barber, the slasher, I don't know. But, you see, the fact is, what he's doing is making the situation worse. Not better, worse.
Yeah, it's sickening.
Well, Tom, maybe we'll all make an exodus together, because I'm just going to start making plans now to get the heck out. I just can't, for so many reasons, I don't want to. I'll tell you one thing, I don't want to croak here, that's for sure.
Oh, I hear you.
You don't want to live here, I don't want to croak here. Okay.
Well, I'll lead the way, and I'll see you at Hands Across New Jersey.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hi, Bob. I'd like to make a quick comment.
Yes.
On a show that was on TV last night. I just happened to catch one episode they had there. And basically it was more Hollywood BS about making token heroes out of female cops that aren't really heroes. There was an episode where they had a
Episode on what? What show?
It was on Top Cop on CBS last night.
On what?
It was called Top Cop.
Top Cop?
Right.
Never heard of it.
Okay, well, I never heard about it either until last night. I just happened to catch it.
Okay. It's one of those phony shows that makes it look as though broads belong on the police department.
Well, I wouldn't say it was totally phony. There were 2 good episodes that the guys there were really heroes, but they had a female cop that was totally ridiculous. Basically, she was driving a Cadillac while she was wearing a uniform, and she spotted a wanted criminal. And instead of getting out of her car and trying to apprehend him, she drove around until she found a police car and tried to get. She got those cops.
I hope you're not going to do the whole show because
No, I'm not.
I don't want to watch it, let alone hear about it.
Okay, well, I just thought that if she was a real hero cop, she would have got out of her car and tried to catch the guy instead of.
Well, those shows are phony, they're fake, and more than that, they're propagandizing America.
That's true.
You know, now most judges are either black or female, or usually both. Lawyers, doctors, people in authority, and of course, for every male cop, there's got to be a female cop.
Right.
I mean, the females have taken over. You know what? I don't watch television in the morning because at least I used to be able to watch Mike Schneider on this network do the news. Now they got Hillary Bowker. So I see Hillary Bowker, and then there's Victoria Corderi, and then there's Faith Daniels. All these broads, I can't stand them. And whatever happened to Jim Ryan on Channel 5? Why do we have to be subjected to Lynn Brown, for heaven's sake? Well, I didn't mean to dump on you. You're on the jab, aren't you?
Well,
yeah.
Huh? Yeah, I am.
Yeah, I figured as much.
Yeah, and just to watch that.
Yeah.
When I'm not working, it's so nauseating.
Well, listen, any self-respecting policeman.
Because most of the female cops are inside the station house doing nothing, and most of them are not out on patrol.
All right, thank you for the call.
All right.
Hello, Peter. This is Bob Grant. You're on WABC. Are you there?
Yes, Bob, I am. How are you? Anyways, before you answer, what I have to say is regarding the caller on AIDS, I was very disturbed because I think you're taking only half the picture when you pick on quote-unquote AIDS people who are exclusively either homosexuals or needle users. I know personally my son, who is a 3-year-old, is in danger of being an AIDS victim at any time because he's a hemophiliac.
Well, those are the exceptions.
Well, what about the exceptions? What about babies that are born to needle users?
Well, we're not talking about that. We're not talking about that.
Those are big expenses to
we're not talking about that, and $4 billion wouldn't be needed for the relatively small group of people you're talking about.
Well, I think the way you addressed the issue was to paint a picture of all AIDS victims being...
No, that isn't the way I said it. I made a very... I think I made a very intelligent observation when I said the trouble with AIDS is it takes too long. Thank you for the call.
Takes too long.
On WABC, let's say hello to Jerome.
Hello, Bob. You were talking about leaving America, but there's really no place to run to. If we look at the world, we see 3 of the most powerful countries, Russia, America... I should have said America first, Russia.
Well, who has to be in a powerful country? Who wants to be in a powerful country?
Well, this is not the point. Those 3 countries, in one form or another, control or dominate the rest of the world.
Ah, my foot.
Well, if you don't want to face facts, then I can understand why you would just want to pick up your tail and run. I can understand that.
No. Hey, look, let me ask you this. If you're leading a good life, say, in... 1750. What do we have here? I'm getting a signal from the control room. All right. If you're leading your life in, say, 1756 Campbell Road Lane, New South Wales, Australia, what difference does it make? Tell me what difference it makes.
Well, if you're living better than you would be living in America right now, that's true.
Well, what do you consider living better? What do you consider the quality of life? What is the quality of life to you? Is it the car you drive, the home you live in, the clothes you wear? No, the quality of life is much more than that, much more profound. It's how you feel about yourself, how you feel about your neighborhood. Do you like what you see?